Hello again, everyone. This is Rocket Rick J18, and today I want to do a video response for a contest. Well, maybe contest isn't the right word. Uh, this is for James Elite Hunters, and the maybe the right way to say it is James has asked us to do um, a video on why we like to collect vintage cards. So, I want to talk about some of the reasons why I really like to collect vintage cards. I was born and grew up during the golden age of baseball, which I will say, was basically the decade of the 50s and the 60s. Um, I was I was born in 1953. I got my first baseball cards in 1959, and I graduated from high school in 1970. So, um, I, I really enjoyed the feeling of opening baseball card packs and getting uh, players that I really thought were great. Just it was just a rush. Probably really unlike any other that I have had as a collector. And when I see these cards that I remember getting out of packs, um, I reconnect with that feeling. So that's one reason. Another reason is I really enjoy looking at cards that depict players or events that I remember from that time period. Not necessarily the joy of opening them from packs, but seeing a baseball game or particularly a World Series or other notable event that I really enjoyed as a collector during my youth. And another reason that I really like vintage cards is because I was really an avid reader, and because I really liked baseball, loved baseball during those years. I read a lot of baseball oriented books. Just examples, I remember reading Babe Ruth's autobiography. I remember reading Jimmy Pearsall's book, Fear Strikes Out. I remember reading books about my favorite players, Mickey Mantle, you know, just all kinds of different players. And I enjoyed reading books about past players. I remember reading a biography of Joe DiMaggio, and I wish I still had that book. I checked it out of the Newark, Delaware Public Library, where my mother took me once a week to get books. And I got this book, and we had a dog at that time, a miniature collie. And he was a great dog. I loved him to death, but he was very, very destructive. He really was a chewer, and he got hold of this book and just chewed the daylights out of it. I mean, it was awful, and I had to pay for it, so which hurt me in two ways. Number one, I lost the book. Number two, I lost my allowance for a week or so. I don't recall that it was a lot of money, but I didn't have a lot of money, so it that was a very vivid event in my youth. So that's another reason that I connect with, with the older players that I never saw play. I never saw Joe DiMaggio play. He had retired before I was born. I never saw Babe Ruth play. He retired before I was born, died before I was born. So I never even saw him, on TV except, watching films. But I remember, every time I was watching a baseball game that was interrupted or delayed by rain, they used to run baseball films. I remember the 1920. No, what was it? The 1926 World Series. The one where Grover Cleveland Alexander came out of the bullpen to strike out Tony Lazzeri with the winning runs on base, and he struck him out on 3 pitches, including a fastball. He told his catcher, he said, "I'm going to throw him a fastball." Start him out with a fastball, and he said, "Oh, you can't do that. Lazzeri's a fastball hitter." He said, "Yeah," he said, "but if I put it where I want to, he's going to pull it foul, and I'm going to get a strike out of it." And by God, that's exactly what he did. And it was, I remember those movies or films and how much I enjoyed them. So even though I didn't see these players play, they were still a big part of my life growing up because they were larger than life now, the great ball players of the past. Another book that I read was a biography of Satchel Paige, and I can't remember the name of the book. It was from a series of biographies that were available in my junior high library. So it would have been sometime between, I don't know, say, I went 6th through 9th grade in the junior high building because of, the baby boomers, and, they just had a big bubble of kids at different times, so they rearranged things temporarily to suit that. And anyway, I got this book about Satchel Paige, and I remember, him reading about him doing crazy things like calling his ninth inning of one game. He said he had his outfielders. He told him, he said, "Don't even go out there." He said, "I'm not going to need you this inning." And he didn't, because he struck out the side in the 9th inning and won the game. Or, he pitched and won 3 games in one day, which I thought was absolutely unbelievable. Different stories like that. So that's those are the biggest reasons why. And I wanted to show a few cards from that. So I'm going to turn the camera down so where I play these cards a little bit better, and I'm going to zoom in to show you the cards better. But the first one is a card that I remember. It's not this card, this specific card, but it is an example of a card that I pulled from packs, and thinking to myself, holy cow, manager's dream. Yeah, it would be if I was a manager. These are the 2 guys I'd want playing for my team. Mickey Mantle, everybody knows that's a card collector, that Mantle is the most expensive card usually in sets from the 50s and 60s. He's either the most expensive or at least a very expensive card. And part of that is attributable to the fact that so many collectors from my era, and maybe even a little older, but especially those eras who remember the cards from the 50s and the 60s and watching the games on TV and so forth, or if they were lucky, going to some games. Now, I went, most of the games that I went to as a kid were in Philadelphia, so I didn't get to see Mickey Mantle play uh, there or anywhere really, except on TV occasionally during during a game of the week. Anyway, I digress. So, but Mickey Mantle was, he was, uh, he had the biggest reputation. Every kid, whether they liked the Yankees or not, liked Mickey Mantle. I never heard anybody say I never liked Mickey Mantle. Maybe there are people like that out there, but I wouldn't pay attention to him because I was a huge Mickey Mantle fan then and now. And Willie Mays, another guy I can't think of anybody who doesn't like Willie Mays or didn't like him during that time period. So anyway, that's what I. This is a card that I pulled from a pack, and I remember the absolute joy that I had. And every time I see it, I reconnect with that feeling. Now here's a card that's not even a card from that era because it's a reprint. But I remember getting the real card, the actual card, in a pack of Who Am I uh, cards that were sold back in the '60s, and I got this card and thinking, how cool is that to get a card of Babe Ruth, And of course, he had a beard, and you were supposed to rub a coin over it and get you could see who the uh, who the actual player was. So on the back, you had questions to give you clues as to who it might be, although it was painfully obvious, who it was. So anyway, that's another example of a card that I got in a pack. The other thing is, events that took place during my youth that I remember and recall, and I'm going to kind of go through these more or less in order by age. Uh, and I'll tell you a little bit about the. So, this was the first World Series that I recall actually watching. And I was in the living room of my grandmother and Uncle Bill's house when the 1960 World Series was on, and I watched all the games, as much of them as I could, and rush home from school because these games were played in the daytime, all of them, and I would watch the ends of the games and as much of the games as possible. And I was actually in October of 1960, I was 7 years old. And it just made a huge impression on me. And I remember this on TV, watching it on TV. Unbelievable. I remember the thrill even of listening to the commercials, which were many of them were for Gillette razor blades, blue and super blue, and just look sharp, be sharp. When they're your team wins another baseball game, just thrill. And of course, this was a huge thrill, even for a 7-year-old, because it was and it's to this day, it's the only World Series that ended on a walk-off home run in the seventh game. Now, Joe Carter, many years later, did it in Game 6, but no one's ever done it in Game 7 except that guy. This guy right up here. I'll get my finger in the right spot. Okay. And there we go. Right there. You get a close-up of my finger pointing at Bill Mazeroski. And a couple of years later, I was 9 years old, and I was at school, and I listened to this. The principal of the school played this game over the intercom. I did have my transistor radio with me, and I will confess to listening to it because the teacher didn't seem to mind. And but on this occasion, he put this game on the radio, and a guy named Chuck Hiller, who was the second baseman for the San Francisco Giants, hit a grand slam home run. And I thought that was the coolest thing because I always pictured myself coming up in the bottom of the ninth inning. His was in the seventh inning, by the way. Coming up in the bottom of the ninth inning and, hitting the bases loaded and 2 outs and hitting a 3-2 pitch for a grand slam home run. And I've hit many of them in my mind. I did hit 1 or 2 in what we call Pony League, which was for 8-year-olds to 12-year-olds. And so I was actually playing in Pony League. We didn't play in October, of course, but during this time period. And Chuck Hiller, who was, just an average player, this was clearly the highlight of his career. And it made a big impression on me because of the, where I was listening to it on the radio. Didn't see it, but listened to it on the radio over the intercom in school. Another World Series, this took place in 1964 and was in Game 3. And the scene was top of the ninth inning. In Yankee Stadium, and bottom of the ninth inning, in Yankee Stadium. And I think it was the ninth inning. Let me just double check this. Yeah, ninth inning. The pitcher's Barney Schultz, who was a knuckleballer. And it was a game that ended in an instant. And he hit the very first pitch that was thrown to him, and he hit it a mile. That seemed like a mile. And into the right field stands. Game over. Well pitched game. And I read later that he had told several of the players, he said, look, you guys don't worry about this. He said, I just got a feeling that I'm going to hit one, and we're going to win this game. And by golly, that's exactly what he did. And of course, the fact that he was my favorite player on my favorite team had nothing to do with the absolute thrill and enjoyment that I got out of that, watching that event. And I saw this one on TV because I'd gotten home in time to watch it on TV, watch the end of the game at least. So that's my thrill of baseball games. And another card I'm going to show you is not even a baseball card. It's a basketball card. Now, I was a senior in high school and just ate up with basketball. Um, I mean, Wilt was my favorite player. He had played, you know, he was a local guy in Philadelphia, went to Overbrook High School, went away for college, came back to play in Philadelphia with the Warriors. The Warriors moved out to the Bay Area and were replaced in Philadelphia by the Syracuse Nationals, who moved to Philadelphia, changed their name to the 76ers. Wilt had been instrumental in winning the 1967 uh, World Championship, NBA Championship. Um, he did all kinds of crazy. Anyway, I love Wilt Chamberlain, and I also really like the Knicks a lot. And would come to be a Knicks fan, and still am today. But this was their first championship, and Wilt is depicted on this card, not because they won the game, but because they didn't. But they did go to 7 games. Jerry West made an absolutely impossible shot to tie a game, send it into overtime when the Lakers lost. But they didn't lose because Wilt didn't play well. He played very well. They didn't lose um, because Jerry West didn't play well, because he did play well. They might have lost because Elgin Baylor didn't play at all. That's a possibility. I think he didn't. I think it was the '70 championship that he didn't play in. I believe he was retired in '73. So anyway, long story short, you know, again, watching this game on TV, uh, replaying those games on the playground with usually under somebody's garage light uh, in the evenings. I mean, we just played everywhere we could, anytime we could, and just a great thrill. So anyway, that's a, an event that I remember so well, and even though Willis Reed came off the bench not off the bench to start Game 7 when he could barely walk. I think he only played something like 12 minutes or something of the first quarter. Anyway, it was not a very long amount of time. I wouldn't play 12 minutes. That's all there was in the first quarter. But I think he only played in the first quarter. Or if he did play, it was not much of the second quarter. And he was uh, made such an impact on his team that they jumped out to a absolutely impossible lead. I believe they had maybe 70 points by halftime and almost a 30-point lead or something close to that. And they won, and it ended up winning by, I don't know, 13 or something like that. They just coasted to victory in the second half. So that was another event that I remember. And I didn't really collect baseball cards after 1970. Uh, I had discovered Cars and Girls, and I was off to college where I thought, more important things to do. But I didn't really. I should have kept collecting, but I shouldn't have given away all my baseball cards because I have no cards from that time period. I have one card that my dear wife, gave me in 1972 of Willie Stargell. Uh, she and I went to, usually tried to go to the regularly scheduled doubleheader, either in Pittsburgh or in Philadelphia between the Phillies and the Pirates. And great thrills. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about is cards of players that I really admired and got to learn about by reading and by, seeing short little clips on TV. And this, of course, was one guy. Uh, I knew about the great DiMaggio. I read Old Man in the Sea, and where Santiago talks about the great DiMaggio and how he, was uh, had perfected his play and was so meaningful to his team, the best at what he did. Just I mean, it's you can't make this stuff up. You just can't. And it reconnects me with that aspect of the game to see these cards. And here's a couple more cards I've got. I already told you about uh, seeing, reading the book about Satchel Paige. And then I got this card at the National in 2022. It was the last card I needed to complete the set, the 49 Bowman set, which I didn't even know about when I was a kid collecting. Uh, but I did know who Satchel Paige was, and I definitely felt like I had a connection to him from reading a biography about him. Another guy that I knew about from reading about, and this is a card that I got at the Strongsville show uh, earlier this year. And Ty Cobb was, just such a great player. Uh, I read about Christy Mathewson and Walter Johnson, all of those players, and that has sparked my interest in trying to collect playing days cards of Hall of Famers from that era because I reconnect with that joy and feeling as a kid. And I read from the sporting news guides and the sporting news registers, baseball registers. I was a stat fanatic, uh, and I either got the stats off the back of baseball cards or, you know, so anyway, so that's why I love collecting vintage cards, and I'm going to wrap this up now and tell you, that uh, this is a VR again, the VR for James Elite Hunters, who wants to know why we collect vintage cards, and I think that it's wonderful that he's doing this. I will give shout out to him and put his channel on that you can go to and look at what he's all about. Great collector, a great vintage collector, and I've seen him, met him at shows and the Nationals. He's just a wonderful guy. So anyway, I think you'll probably hear these same kinds of sentiments echoed throughout these VR responses. So let me just go back to the. There we go. So that's what I have for you, and this is Rocket Rick J18 wishing all your collecting dreams come true and come true again and again and again every time you look at your baseball cards. So